Hey everybody, and this is JJ, and we're back again for another ASUS PCDIY hardware live stream. Hopefully everybody is enjoying their Friday, getting ready to have a good weekend. If you're going to have, hopefully, of course, a 3-day weekend, stay safe, stay healthy, and as we're getting in now to summer, hopefully everybody is staying cool because it's definitely going to be hot. I know already in my neck of the woods, we're hitting our first weekend, which will be over 100 degrees. Right now it's actually a little bit over 100 degrees, I think like 101 or something like that. So for those that are out there, make sure to go ahead and keep cool, stay safe, stay healthy. With that, let's go ahead and get ready to kick things off. We're going to have a little bit of a different stream this week. We don't have actually that many new product announcements. As kind of some of you may or may not be aware, depending on how frequently you watch our stream or if you're part of our PCDIY group, we almost a weekly rollout of brand new products. So quite a bit of product announcements that we have from week to week to week. This is one of the few weeks where we don't necessarily have any immediate new products. We did actually have a couple. I didn't post them up, and because some of them are what we refer to as a broader channel rollout, just means that we're actually pushing them out for a broader level of availability as opposed to being limited to maybe one e-tailer. But with that, I want to go ahead and quickly give off some updates to some recent product announcements in terms of them now actually being available. But with that, let's go ahead and see who we have joining us today on the stream. So we've got Connor, one of the best in terms of our PCDIY community members. Fantastic to have you here, Connor. Thanks so much. And if you guys haven't checked out, and if you're not part of our PCDIY group, make sure to go ahead and submit your actually direct storage benchmark. We did a really cool actually live stream with Crucial yesterday, which actually talked about the latest generation PCI Express Gen 5 M.2 based SSDs. We talked about actually direct storage, and there's actually a cool performance benchmark that allows you to actually see the performance benefits of this next generation storage technology and how it can really offer a low level of CPU utilization and a much higher level of bandwidth when we talk about actually how it interfaces with the GPU. There's actually a cool open source benchmark. We have it actually loaded up in our PCDIY group. You can go ahead and submit your results and see if you can actually beat my initial result that I've gone ahead and posted with a T700 Gen 5 based SSD. Now, you may be able to go ahead and beat my score if you've got a very high-end system using kind of the flagship Gen 4 based drives, if you have also a very high-end GPU. I went ahead and kind of went with a balanced configuration because I think for the overall configuration that might be adopting into a Gen 5 based drive, it was a good balance. So it was a 4070, so not the highest end card. So some of you might be able to actually eke out a little bit of a higher score, but make sure to go ahead and check out our PCDIY group if you're interested in checking out that benchmark, and make sure to watch yesterday's stream if you want to find out a little bit more about the next generation PCI Gen 5 drives. We've got Michael also joining us, man. Fantastic to have you here. We've got a viewer there over on Facebook. Fantastic, man. Thanks for having you. We got H2O Computers. Eric is letting us know the audio is good. Thank you so much. Fantastic to have you here. Let me see right here. Oh, looks like we've got a user, DDA40X fan, Bruce. Hey, JJ, just received the ROG Spatha X wireless gaming mouse you highlighted in the previous episode. Can't wait to install it and use. Awesome, man. Thanks so much for being Team ROG and Team Spatha. That's actually one of my favorite mouse that we have in our lineup. It's a bit bigger mouse, so it's not going to be to everybody's liking, but, you know, I'm about 6'2". I've got large hands, so for me, I really do like having something that I can feel a little bit more comfortable in terms of having support for around my palm, for my thumb, and having a little bit of a rest point, and that mouse really is going to get you covered for people who have bigger hands, you know, wired and wireless support, ROG micro switches, tons of buttons and customization options, a really cool option, and you gotta love that magnetic stand, right? It's a really cool little magnetic stand that it has right there. All right, Sue Min also joining us, and I'm going to be seeing Sue Min tomorrow, actually, for those of you that are also going to be joining us in our ASUS booth that we're going to have at the Anime Expo in Los Angeles. So hopefully I'll see you guys there. All right, let's get ready to go ahead and quickly just touch on some of those product updates that I talked about, guys, and we will get ready to go ahead and kick things off as we get ready to talk about our build guide. So in this stream, we're actually going to be kind of giving you guys a little bit of foundation if maybe you're interested in building a kind of new gaming system, but you're not necessarily looking to really break the bank. We wanted to target something around about like $1,000 to $1,100 in terms of the build, but still didn't want to compromise on the overall performance, upgradability over time, airflow, and I think a lot of the core specifications that I think enthusiasts sometimes can overlook when you're kind of going too aggressive, I think, on your budget. So I think it's going to be a really great balance of giving you great level of functionality, core specifications, and really being able to offer you a solid gaming experience, whether you're talking about high refresh rate gaming at 1080p, high refresh rate gaming at 1440p. So we're going to be jumping into that in a moment, but let's go ahead and quickly take a look at some of these updates that I've got right here. So this is going to say new this week, and this is not from new this week. This is from a couple of weeks ago, but a couple of these products, well, actually a few of these products actually I think have been of quite of interest to a lot of users, and so I just want to go ahead and give some quick updates on these guys. So let's go ahead and do that. So first and foremost, you can see right here for the RADEON 3 240 and the RADEON 3 360, these are the Noctua based variants. So that means that they don't come with the ARGB fans. We already had and made the announcement for the ARGB models in the previous week. Those are going to be coming out into the channel very, very shortly, probably in about the next, I'd probably say 7 to 12 days. It could take a little bit longer depending on the e-tailer that you're looking at, but the Noctua models are available right now. So if you do want to buy them, they actually are listed right now in the ASUS store for both the 240 and the 360. So those models are available. Do keep in mind that, again, these are the Noctua based versions. So if you're interested in the ARGB model, so that means that they come with the brand new daisy chain magnetic ARGB based fans. Those are still a little bit away. And then of course for the white, those are going to probably be coming maybe sometime in early Q3. So probably July timeframe. So that's right around the corner, but we'll have more information when we're ready to essentially release those into the channel. So just keep that in mind. These two entry offerings that we have with the EHF monitors that we we talked about, which I think are kind of an entry gaming monitor, higher than standard refresh rate. A lot of times at these price point, you'd be looking much more like a 60 hertz monitor, but here you actually get 100 hertz refresh rate. Still actually a nice quality monitor, both IPS based, thin bezel design, and very reasonable price point for somebody that's just looking for a nice upgrade. And then you got the 24 and 27 inch. Those are both right now also available. This monitor, which I'm really big fan of, featuring a new generation fast IPS based display, ultra high refresh rate, really great monitor, variable overdrive support, $259. I think it's going to be one of the best monitors that we're going to offer for an aggressively priced kind of what used to be almost flagship level specification, high refresh rate 1080p gaming monitor. That one is now available, but it was quickly selling, so I don't know if the stock is even still available. Last time I checked it, it was just a very small number of quantity available, but it was already also available on the ASUS store. When we move over to some of these other products as well, they're pretty much all available as well. So this is our new kind of entry level but very performance spec oriented Tough Gaming, the VG27AQ-ML1A. That's a great choice if you're looking to step up to 1440p and also have ultra high refresh rate and fast IPS based panel with low response. Really great option coming in at $399. I'm a really big fan of that monitor. PG38UQ is a very special monitor. It's kind of a new almost specification in standard, where it's kind of that sweet spot between kind of something where you got like a 32 or an ultra wide, which would be like in that 34, 35 inch category, and then something like our ROG Swift OLED or LCDs, which are in that 42 to 48 inches. Here you kind of really get that sweet spot of going to really big and immersive, but still having very usable desk space at 38 inches, 4K, high refresh rate, HDMI 2.1, outstanding color gamut coverage. That unit is available right now, so it is available, $999 right there, you can see. And we also have the availability for the RG Strix LC model, so that's the 4090, which is of course the liquid cooled model. Just means the self-contained AIO, so it's all pretty much prepackaged, good to go, just slot it in and you're good to go. And then we also have gone ahead and listed the dual RX 7600 OC, which is actually going to be the core GPU that we're going to be using in the build guide today, as far as what we're going to be recommending for our build guide configuration. So pretty much all of those models, they're all available right now, with, like I said, the exception maybe that 1080p ultra high refresh rate gaming monitor might be sold out. All right, but otherwise, as always, for any of the latest and greatest updates, just make sure to watch the stream weekly, or make sure to be part of our ASUS PCDIY group, and you'll see about all the updates when it comes to any new product announcements or any availability announcements we have. And the last item that I am going to touch on here, let me go ahead and bring it up. I think I've got it right here. We have the very cool ROG Strix Scope 2. So this is our brand new keyboard that we just showed off at Computex, and let me go ahead and double check the notes on it. I'm giving you guys kind of the first opportunity to be able to actually get the pre-order for a limited period of time. So give me 1 second to go ahead and bring up my notes right here. And I want to make sure we have it. So to confirm, we will also have our Scope 2 96 available for purchase in the US at Micro Center. So it'll be exclusively available at Micro Center starting tomorrow until the 3rd. Okay, so until the 3rd, and you'll be able to go ahead and purchase it. I'm going to go ahead and drop that link in the chat for you guys. So if you kind of want first come, first serve opportunity to be able to pick up the ROG Strix Scope 296, then I'm going to go ahead and drop the link in the chat for you guys. It is going to be an initial exclusive offering just for those few days at Micro Center. And if you're not aware of what this model is all about, it's a really great addition that we've got here to our lineup. So let me go ahead and show you right here. So this is going to be the ROG Strix Scope 96. So it's essentially full-size keyboard, but compressed down, almost kind of like in a TKL-based form factor. So I'm a really big fan of TKL. I like that you get essentially a little bit more reserved space. You don't put as much stress on your labrum. You have a little bit more kind of closer opportunity to bring your mouse in, keep it kind of tight and angled in. So this kind of gives you that balance, but if you still want your numpad, you get that nice compression, right? And you get a more compact design. This is also using our latest generation SpeedNova-based chipset. It's got a really cool premium design in terms of also having sound dampening material built in. It has our improved stabilizers. It also has a hot swap PCB design. It features our brand new ROG Snow switches, which are actually pre-lubed. They have a really nice actually housing material, which gives them a nice little kind of thocky sound to them. So if you really like that kind of clean, smooth, thocky sound, you're going to appreciate that. But these aren't, I would say, overtly loud. They just have a nice audible tone to them. I personally like really, really quiet switches. So having the hot swap PCB for me would be really nice because I could go to an even quieter switch. Although, pro tip, if maybe you want to dampen these a little bit more, one way that you could dampen them is you could put an O-ring. So you could put a small O-ring, you could put that on the actual switch, and then from there put your cap back on, and that would actually mute that a little bit more, and that can actually significantly quiet down the actual switch. But overall, this model will be coming out. It is a multi-connection standard, so you do have both wired and wireless-based connectivity available to you, and we'll have an update. Right now, there is a little bit of a delay in terms of fully enabling the ROG Omni receiver functionality, so make sure to keep tuned. We'll have more information when it comes to the ROG Omni receiver, which that little receiver, the cool thing about it is that's going to allow for essentially flexibility to be paired with other items like our ROG Harp Ace, addition-based mouse, where you can actually use one adapter, right, but for multiple devices. And that may be expanded to other items over time, but make sure to go ahead and keep tuned for updates as we're getting ready to release that information, okay? And also, our model that we will be selling in North America does already come with PBT keycaps. I'm actually using the PBT keycaps, which is a great upgrade that we offer right now on our Claymore 2. I love the PBT keycaps. They're double shot. They just essentially are going to be, you don't have to worry about kind of grime buildup or having the legend fade out. They're really good at mitigating things like oil and dust, debris, and dander. Really, really great option right there. So that is going to be the ROG Strix Scope 96. And let me go ahead and drop that link in the chat for those that are going to be interested. And actually, let me quickly show you just those really nice ROG snow switches. I really like the way these switches look. And this is going to be an upgrade. The cool thing about the the ROG Snow switches is going to be very similar to kind of like our ROG RX switches, which have a little bit of a different design than a traditional cross stem, is that you actually see here that you have a stabilizer mechanism where you have walls. And that really allows you to actually mitigate something that's called force deviation, so that when you're actually depressing the keycap has less wobble, and it allows for a much, much more linear and smooth kind of consistent typing experience. I'm a huge fan of this, especially if you're a little bit of a quicker touch typer. I really love that, but also I just don't like keycap wobble. And on a stemmed keycap, a cross stemmed keycap, if you get really kind of lower profile and really nice molded keycaps, you can kind of mitigate it a bit, but it still is going to be realistic. I can tell you that I've got custom keyboards that are literally $450, that I've tried out, and compare that against something like, our Claymore 2, and the keycap wobble is superior on the RX keyboard. But part of that is because it's a 4-point stem design where the cap is much more stable, it's much more consistent. So that is kind of one of the key elements outside of, like I said, the acoustics and the pre-lubing that we have here on the ROG Snow switches. So that is definitely a cool update. Let me go ahead and drop that in the chat. For you guys that are interested in maybe picking up that model right there. Hey, Liquify Mods is joining us as well. We've also got Sniff Computer Design joining us right here. Let me go ahead and see. Michael's asking us, will the Omni receiver have enough power for long distance communication? So that's long distance is, I guess, relative. It really depends up to you. Now, you are using RF. So RF is already pretty far reaching. In reality, it's not like you're going to be using your gaming keyboard 20 feet away, right? In most situations, most people are going to be using your keyboard probably within, 3 to 6 feet is probably, I'd say, the normal range. It is the best performing wireless chipset we've ever put in there, and we feel confident it's actually probably almost the best performing chipset in the entire industry. And it's actually quite a bit better than even what you see on a lot of custom keyboards in terms of the latency and the performance. There's a lot of intelligence in terms of what's called hopping. So it's consistently monitoring the actual signal spectrum and making jumps accordingly to be able to maintain low latency and performance. But one thing that a lot of people don't understand when it comes to wireless is that the reality is that you have radio frequency and you can have interference. And so when you plug into, let's say, the rear of a motherboard, so here I'm going to pull out our older adapter, and this adapter works great. If you guys have been seeing here on the stream, I sometimes have 3-4 systems simultaneously running here. There's tons of RF environments, and I've always been able to use this wirelessly without any problems. And this is even with, like I said, the older chipset design. But the reason why I'm making a reference to this is that sometimes, depending on your environment and sometimes even your motherboard, you might not maybe be using an ASUS motherboard. There could be different configurations. Even actually sometimes if you do things like overclocking, they can influence certain buses, but you may need to actually move this adapter away from the actual port to be able to actually improve signal stability and reduce RF essentially mitigation. So in some of our products, there's actually like an extension cable. So there's a cable that you can plug in here, and then there's an adapter, and you could take this and you could plug this in there, and then you can position that kind of wherever you want, and you could move it into another location to be able to improve your experience. Other options could also be that sometimes, depending on how much you're pulling or hitting the USB bus, you can sometimes have sensitivity to that wireless adapter in terms of how it's receiving the information. So you can also try different USB buses. So instead of maybe being on the top port, you could move down to a bottom port and you could see if there's actually any differences. So just those are a couple of things that you can try to keep in mind when it comes to potentially improving that. Michael says better than Logi. Yes, I would say better than Logi. In the past, we were already comparable to Logitech. We already offered what was called true 1 millisecond gaming grade wireless. And with our SpeedNova based chipset, we feel it's, like I said, a best in class implementation. But even if you wanted to say the same, it's the same, effectively 1 millisecond. I mean, beyond that, to get better performance than that, you would need to be wired, right? If you want the absolute kind of best standard in terms of consistency and reliability, wired is still the best option. But for sure, it doesn't matter whether you want to go either option. You can feel confident that you can have, I say, a gaming grade experience. So low latency and reliable. All right. So that takes care of that, guys. That's our quick notes on, so in terms of availability for some items, as well as for the for the RG Strix Scope 2 96 availability. Last note is, I believe we did drop in an announcement in the ASUS PCDIY group, but for those of you not available, that did not check it out and maybe in or around the Los Angeles area tomorrow, if you're interested and you're a fan of things of anime, technology, computers, PCDIY, gaming, you may want to check out the Anime Expo. So I will be there tomorrow for a short period of time, a few hours. We're going to be doing some giveaways. We've got some amazing builds and mods where we've gone ahead and coordinated with Bluehost Studios. They're going to be showing off, I think, 3 different builds. We've also got our Powered by ASUS partner there with iBuyPower, and we've got a full setup and booth with some cool gaming systems. You'll be able to see some of our latest and greatest hardware. We've got things like the brand new RADEON 3 cooler. We've got our gaming chair. We've got the Rikiri Pro, new peripherals, all kinds of new stuff. We've got I think a Street Fighter tournament, and we've got a whole bunch of other stuff going on. I think like license plate machine, which is pretty cool, like a limited edition ROG like license plate thing you can get done there, and some other cool stuff going on. So if you guys are interested and you're in or around the area, feel free to go ahead and drop by, and we look forward to seeing you there. So with that, hopefully you'll get the opportunity to stop by if you can. All right. Hey, Connor. Would definitely come by, but I'm an East Coast guy. Yeah, sorry about that. You know, we throw different events all times at different places. I think there is some stuff planned later in the year that might be sometime on the East Coast. As always, when we do have those events, we do try to make sure that you guys are available. We'll let you know whether it's in the PCDIY group or, of course, in our social media channels. All right, guys. And from there, that pretty much covers all of that. So let's get ready to go ahead and actually jump into my little bit of my build guide that I've got right here for those of you that may be looking to build a new system, but not necessarily break the bank. Again, for anybody that's right now watching the stream, if you have any other questions or comments on anything else ASUS related, because like I said, we don't have a heavy week this week in terms of new products that we're talking about, feel free to go ahead and drop them in the chat, and I'll do my best to go ahead and get into it. Forgot the link on which. I did drop the link already, I think, from Micro Center, so not sure which link you're wondering about. If you can let me know which one. And if you want the link to the Anime Expo, sure, I can drop the link to the Anime Expo. Give me 1 second. No, I did drop the link already, so it is in there. So you can see it. It is the link is in the chat for Micro Center. All right. So with that, let's get ready to kind of go over our build guide here and see what we've got going on. So kind of the way that I kind of broke this down was that I wanted to have kind of a gaming PC, right, where the performance target was high quality 1080p gaming, 1440p gaming. Now, of course, a large part of this is really dependent on the games, right? And the reason why I say that is because if you're playing Ori and the Blind Forest and Forza and, you know, Doom Eternal versus like Cyberpunk, right, and Atomic Heart, right, it's very, very different gameplay experience. And even when people use some of these terms, you can't really just generalize. You can't just say 1080p gaming or 1440p gaming or even just say 4K gaming saying is not possible, because it entirely depends. I've been playing 4K for 6+ years, but it depends on the games that you're playing, right? Different game engines have different requisites in terms of not only the kind of the performance, but the VRAM requirements. There's a lot of different factors. Then of course your monitor is a big influence here. Is like, are you trying to hit a specific refresh rate target? Are you playing competitively? Are you trying to hit more kind of like a certain kind of refresh rate target and a certain resolution? Here I wanted to overall just have a solid mix that, you know, legitimately you could pretty much load up any game that you wanted to, be able to have a smooth and responsive gaming experience. I did have the target that I wanted to generally be able to usually kind of hit that target of, I'd say, about 1080p 144 to about 180 hertz, if not greater, depending on the game engine and in a large amount of situations, and then be able to have a very solid 1440p gaming experience. I'm a really big fan of single player games, but of course for a lot of you that might be in the esports category, you know, whether we're talking about things like Fortnite, Destiny 2, Warzone, Valorant, Apex Legends, right? Any one of those type of game titles here, you're definitely going to be able to have a smooth, responsive gaming experience in that scenario, and definitely be able to benefit from the monitors that we're going to be making some recommendations on, even when you're talking about above like the 200 FPS a second target, right? So this was kind of the overall target in terms of our overall performance. So let's quickly go ahead and take a look at kind of the component configuration that we're making the recommendation kind of outlined for. So for the CPU, we've gone ahead and gone with an AMD Ryzen. Actually, that's a little bit of a misnomer right there, because I've got a AM4 kind of drop back recommendation. So it's actually not the 5600. This would actually be the Ryzen 5 7600. So I'm going to go ahead and make a quick correction to that, but that's actually would be for that price. Now, the reason why I didn't go with the X model is that you're within a couple of percent of the X model, but the benefit is that the standard 7600X already comes with an inbox cooler. Now, while you can definitely upgrade it, it's going to already offer you very, very good performance, and it's not going to really be the limiting factor. It's already going to give you generally better performance than any of the AM4 CPUs prior to that. So it can even kind of go head to head in some situations compared to something like a 5800X 3D, right? Although the 3D in some games may be, of course, faster, but overall as a whole, you're going to get even faster performance, better IPC, and of course you got the support for the new chipset architecture that it's bringing along, right? So that's going to be the Ryzen 7600. Optional cooler, we'll talk a little bit about that, but that's going to be the BA120. That's a very reasonable just tower heatsink that's going to keep it cool, quiet, and performant, give you some flexibility if you want to enable things like PBO and take a look at some performance tuning. I've got a test system right here that I can show you guys if you're interested in some of the easy ways that we can give you some additional performance if you want to use overclocking and you want to move outside of standard kind of stock performance configurations. Motherboard is going to be the Tough Gaming B650M plus Wi-Fi. We're going to talk about the core specs of this board. It's a micro ATX based motherboard. Storage, we're going to go with a 1 terabyte, especially with a lot of games now, you know, tucking somewhere between like 40 to sometimes upwards of 100 gigabytes. I felt 1 terabyte was really kind of the benchmark in terms of giving us enough capacity for Windows, for our general files, and for our games. 32 gigabytes of memory. This is probably a little bit more than you need. Realistically, 16 gigabytes for an entry-level system is more than enough, but 32 gigabytes gives us a lot. And at this new price point, you're getting 32 gigabytes at $100. It's very reasonable, and that's going to be more than enough memory than you're going to need for any type of gaming scenario, and even if you're a heavy multitasking user. Then we've got the dual RX 7600. That's going to be, of course, our graphics card. It's cool, it's compact, it's quiet, and for our target kind of gaming experience, very performant. We're going to be packing this inside of the AP201, which is our micro ATX chassis. We do have it in white and black, but with all these components, it's going to be a black-based themed in terms of the build. Very reasonable and gives us lots of flexibility to be able to upgrade over time. And then for the power supply, we're actually speccing a little bit more than we would need. Definitely, we don't even need a 750 watt power supply. If you probably tapped out the power configuration here, you'd probably be sub 500 watts. Somewhere around that range. So this actually gives us a little bit more. So even over time, if later we want to upgrade to something like a 7900 XT, you could entirely do that, and you'd have enough headroom. If you want to overclock, you've got enough headroom, but also the ATX 3.0 native power supply gives us flexibility that if we went to a different graphics card later that has a native 16-pin 12-volt high-power connector, it's already there. And the cables also on this are really, really nice, and we're going to talk about that. And so overall, this brings us at or around somewhere. Actually, some of this pricing is even a little bit lower than it is right now. So I budgeted out. You can probably be spending a little bit around like $1050 to about $1100-ish, $1125, somewhere around there. But very reasonable in terms of the price point and the performance. And this is really going to be a very solid performance in terms of the overall build. So let's get ready to kind of go through our core components here. Let me quickly make a quick edit right here on that part list, just so we have that correctly listed. And I'm going to quickly check to see if we have any questions before we start getting into the component configuration selection, and we'll go from there. But give me 1 second to edit this. All right, there we go. And also on a side note, we will again be talking that if you want to even go a little bit lower price, so maybe this is just a little bit more than you want to, part of me might kind of initially make the recommendation I would try to say is just maybe you could save up a little bit to kind of hit this, because I really think the overall balance is going to be very strong in terms of kind of your core specifications. But we will have an AM4 option that will allow you to even go lower in terms of the overall price point. So if you want to be able to save a little bit more money, you have a little bit more budget restriction, the AM4 will then use, of course, an older AM4 base series CPU. We'll change the motherboard. It'll of course come with DDR4 memory. All of those will save you money. So it'll be a little bit slower CPU, a little older motherboard, and then an older memory standard. And we'll also even drop down the GPU, where we could go with our the Radeon RX 6600, very solid card, and still gives us a lot of performance, but we dropped this probably a few $100s. So you could definitely get well below the $1,000 marker if you wanted to kind of hit that from a performance target. All right, so let's get ready to go into our core components right here. Michael going is, what is the JJ, what is the TUF flagship motherboard? So it wouldn't be just TUF, TUF Gaming. TUF doesn't exist, okay? That's important always to note. Sometimes people forget the TUF Gaming part, but it's TUF Gaming flagship motherboard. It would probably be the Z790 Plus, or it'd be the TUF Gaming X670E, because those are the highest end chipsets, so you get the kind of the most features and functions. TUF doesn't go beyond either one of those. That's the highest end kind of spec, let's say, models that we have. So the TUF Gaming 790 Plus, we have that in a DDR4 and we have that in a DDR5 version. And then of course for the X670E, that's going to be only in DDR5. But that's a really solid board for both of those options. Really good choices if you kind of wanted to move up to a higher class of board with more functions and features and you want that overclocking support. Okay. Let me go ahead and just quickly see. Heart MK2 says you can never go wrong with 32 gigabytes of RAM. Yeah, I think the more RAM, the merrier. Although specifically, we're going to talk about why we picked the memory, and I'm going to show you a demo of why we picked this crucial memory, because I wanted to also have a kind of build that hopefully was really streamlined, so that the user literally had to do very, very little to just be able to get up and running. Because one thing that you have to account for when you go with memory that features an overclock profile like an XMP or a DOCP, any one of those performance profiles, is you have to manually go in and engage them. And so I really like the fact that this crucial kit of memory that we have is going to be a streamlined kit experience. It actually works directly in adherence to the AMD or to the Intel port table, and it'll get you 100% up and running with essentially out you having to do anything to configure the system. So it's very, very nice and streamlined. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it here. We'll go with the first item. So Ryzen 5 7600, like I said, $220. This is going to be a great part in terms of the overall core performance. It's going to really get us to, like I said, very close to the highest levels of performance that we'd have, where we wouldn't be limiting the GPU. Again, even if we went with a higher end GPU and we jumped into something like like a 6750 XT, a 7900 XTX, or 7900 XTX, you wouldn't be limiting the overall performance of that GPU. So it's a very capable part in terms of what you have relative to the performance. And like I said, the main reason why I went with this versus the X model is that you are able to go ahead and have this model save you a little bit, because it actually comes with the inbox cooler. So the inbox cooler is not going to be a high-end cooling solution, but definitely just for general desktop use and gaming use, it's going to be fine. Now, if you're going to be a user that's maybe going to do a little bit more demanding workloads, maybe you're going to be running some heavier, maybe video encoding, maybe you're also doing a little bit of additional work that uses a lot of threads, keep in mind that the overall kind of peak temperature that's supported here is going to be 95 C. That's the official rated temperature that the CPU is designed to work up to. So no issues in that regard, but we've got that secondary cooler that we're going to talk about here to give you a little bit more headroom if you want to be able to keep your temperatures lower, and you want to be able to maybe even get a little bit more performance by enabling things like PBO, where you could essentially get about the same performance of this 7600X right? But by just enabling that. Now that does require you to essentially manually engage overclocking. You have to account for overclocking considerations, but it's an easy option that you have available to you. And like I said, the other big benefit is that from a cost savings perspective, if you want to save yourself that $30 from the cooler that we're recommending, you could just go with the stock cooler that comes included with this model. So you'll see that this is 6 cores, 12 threads, up to that 5.1 gigahertz, right? We can go ahead and boost up a little bit more than that by enabling the PBO technology. And also, I'm a big fan of this. It's essentially a default 65 watt part. So very power efficient, right? It's cool, it's efficient, and it's performant. So it gives us a great baseline, even as we're going into a smaller system. We don't have to kind of be super stressed about having a huge kind of high performing level of hardware in here. Okay, so that's going to be the Ryzen 5 7600X. Now, in terms of the next item right here, we're going to go ahead and just quickly touch on the cooler. This is going to be from our friends over at Thermalright. So Thermalright does offer a great kind of line of coolers. They're under kind of the assassin designation. And so this model specifically is going to be the BA120. It stands for Burst Assassin, but it's a very solid cooler, clean, compact design. Now this is going to be for the non-ARGB based model. The one that I have gone ahead and that I will link, and essentially when I give you guys the full rundown of all the lists, is going to be the actual ARGB model. This way it just gives you a cool little kind of just little spotlight effect, I think, on the chassis. It'll look cool, it's clean. If you want to go with the non-ARGB model, that's fine. It'll save you about like $5 to $8 approximately. And if you want with the ARGB model, it goes up $5 to $8. Now the pricing that I have here, $28, that's going to be for the ARGB based version. Let me see if they have that. Yeah, so they have it right here. So you can see right there, that's the difference. It just comes with the ARGB fan. That'll connect into our ARGB header. This is a really nice overall design in terms of the finished heat pipe design. You can see you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 heat pipes. I think it's rated up to 245 watts. The reality is that you could still easily, if you wanted to go up to something like a 7700X or something like that, which would be another great CPU choice if you were looking kind of for an upgrade. You entirely gets the job done, no issues right here. So that's going to be our kind of upgrade cooler recommendation. Now, some people might go like, JJ, shouldn't I go with like an AIO cooler? There's no reason, especially at this price point, to kind of have to jump into an AIO cooler. Now, could you go with one? For sure. We've got our Tough Gaming LC coolers. We have a 120 and we have a 240 millimeter, and we're going to be shortly coming out with a 360 millimeter, which are going to be our more price aggressive based offerings. So yes, you could go with one, but you don't really need to. One, you're not going to really get any better performance. This is already going to keep the CPU cool and quiet. It's going to allow for us to actually enable things like PBO. So unless you specifically want the look of having the AIO, there's no reason to add that additional cost, right, to our system. Here you're getting a very reasonable unit. It's simpler to install, less kind of cables that you kind of have to account for. It's also, even maybe some degree, a higher level of reliability. A heatsink, it cannot fail. It's just a big piece of metal, very easy to be able to go ahead and get installed in there. And you know, if you want to swap out to a little bit better performance, you can always change out the fans if you want to go that route. So that is the reason why we're recommending a tower heatsink. Why don't you let me know, when you built your first system, was it using a tower heatsink or were you using an AIO, right? So that is going to be our recommendation there. Some feedback there from HO Computers. Thermalright makes good products for the price. Yeah, I definitely agree. I think for the price point, very, very solid option in terms of, like I said, getting you up and running right there. Desk Grunt goes, as far as I'm aware, I haven't seen any issues on my my two primary test beds. Both of them are utilizing the latest generation Intel controllers, and I'm not having any issues. Now, keep in mind, in the past, when there's the RADA updates issued by Intel, it can be switch configurate dependent. So that means that not every essentially permutation in terms of the network topology will be affected. If you have an issue, I'd recommend reaching out to Intel's service and support team, as well as you could file a service and support ticket with our team. If you run into an issue using the updated firmware and the updated driver, it's important to make sure that you use the drivers that we supply for our motherboards. Some users will go and use kind of third-party or open kind of pro set drivers that are available directly from Intel. There can be specific parameters that are tuned or packaged to the driver based on the implementation that we have on our boards. So it is important to use our verified drivers, which go through our QVL and our validation process. And that's also going to be a requirement if you want to reach out to our service and support team to assist you with that. But right now, I don't don't have any issues making any recommendations for users if they want to be able to have a 2.5 gig enabled solution. Whether you actually go with a board, some of our boards, most of them are using Intel. There are a couple that are using maybe a Realtek based solution, but both of them are solid in terms of the overall UDP, TCP packet performance, and the overall kind of CPU overhead. Although you will have a little bit more of a rich management set of options, of course, with the Intel Pro set. All right, let me go ahead and just see. So Rob Lewis goes, AIOs didn't exist when I first built my PC. So maybe for you, it might have been, did you go with water cooling, right? Instead of an AIO based cooler, right? All right. So let's go with our next component that we've got here in terms of our list. So next item is going to be the motherboard. So we're going to be going with the Tough Gaming B650M plus Wi-Fi. So let's go ahead and take a look at this board right here. I've got my images that I'm going to load up. Give me 1 second right here. All right, so this is going to be our board that we're going to be recommending. So it's a compact micro ATX based board, but it looks great. It's got a very clean, nice monochrome design, nice performant VRM design, definitely more than enough to handle the CPU that we're running. And again, even if you went to the highest end CPU, now one of the reasons why we went with AM5 is to give us the flexibility that we could go with something like a Ryzen 5 7600, but later if you wanted to drop in something like a 7700X, you wanted to go to 7800X 3D, maybe even a next generation AM5 series CPU, as AMD has already committed that there will be a refresh of CPUs for the AM5 platform. This gives us lifespan because we've got a performant VRM design, right? We have a good thermal solution in place. So again, it doesn't matter the CPU that we're going to be running. You can be able to feel confident that it's going to be able to run with stability and reliability, even allow for overclocking margin. It's going to be able to be well cooled due to the robust VRM design and the good thermal solution. It even actually has supplemental power connectors right here where it has our ProCool power connectors. That means thicker pins, which are actually helping to increase the current handling and operate at lower temperatures. It's a great overall design. In terms of kind of the connectivity for fans, we've got robust fan connectivity here. So we've got 2 CPU fan headers, so CPU and CPU optional. So that means, again, even if we went with a tower heatsink and we had like a push and pull fan configuration, you could support both those fans simultaneously. If you went to like a 240mm AIO cooler, you could support both fans directly on the motherboard. It also has the AIO pump header, which is nice because it gives you that flexibility if you upgrade to an AIO at a later time. You've got your 4 debug LEDs, which are built onto the motherboard. It's going to have an internal USB-C Type-C header, which is great for our chassis because our chassis has USB Type-C. But again, if you have a different chassis, you get both the legacy USB 3 and you get the newer internal USB-C on this board. You're going to have 3 ARGB headers that are going to be on the motherboard, so that's going to be great to just give us flexibility to be able to connect ARGB devices, like if we want to have fans or LED strips, different types of accessories. Some nice things that you may not notice, even compared to some competitors. There's other competitors that have similar price boards, but I can tell you they might not have things like our higher quality reinforced DIMM slots. This actually helps to improve the stability and the rigidity of the slot and actually improve initialization quality. Actually, DDR5 is very signal sensitive, so actually when you don't actually have these little guys right here, there can be a little bit more flexing that occurs sometimes to the slot, and that can actually reduce sometimes the signal performance. And here you can see that this model, of course, has that. You also will be able to note that a nice thing, even though we're going with a PCI Express Gen 4 M.2 based SSD, this motherboard does have support for PCI Express Gen 5. So if you wanted to be able to go ahead and drop in something like this guy, we talked about this yesterday in our stream here, where if you want to drop in something like a T700, so this is a PCI Express Gen 5 M.2 based SSD, maybe a year, 2 years down the road, maybe some more games come out on the market that have PCI Express Gen 5, and you want to be able to drop in that, you will have that support on the motherboard. The motherboard has PCI Express Gen 5 M.2 SSD support. So that's very, very nice. And it has 2 heat sinks. Another thing that you may or may not notice, I can tell you that there's a competitor that has a very similar board in this price band, but the way that they've actually positioned their M.2 drives is not as sensible in terms of the layout, in terms of accessibility, as well as also in thermal design. So they actually have both of their M.2 slots positioned underneath the by 16 slot. With the Tough Gaming board, you'll see that one slot is positioned above the graphics card. This allows for better accessibility, even if you have it installed in your system, for instance. But also from a thermal perspective, it actually will perform better because you are going to have more heat soak. So when you have your graphics card in here and there's essentially more heat that's essentially being propagated to that underlying area, you are going to be essentially more thermal. There's a higher probability you could thermal throttle the drive, even with the heatsink in place. Now, this depends on the performance of the M.2 SSD that you have. Here, of course, we have a nice heatsink in there to be able to provide thermal dissipation, but keep in mind, especially for, like I said, the PCI Express Gen 5 drives, it makes actually more sense to have the PCI Express Gen 5 thermally isolated than to actually have it underneath the graphics card, which some competitor motherboards do. You'll also find other things like the CMOS battery slot. If you need to maybe debug your system or replace this, there are some competitors that are forcing the CMOS battery underneath this area where you have like the graphics card installed. Again, we are making it more directly exposed and accessible. This takes what we refer to as more kind of intelligent design layout, and you can immediately notice this like in a checklist, right? But it does improve your user experience. We also do give you a supplemental slot. Now, in most situations, this slot is going to be covered, but if maybe you went to water cooling and you use a single slot solution, or maybe you don't need a higher end based graphics card and you were just running off like the integrated graphics, you have 3 slots versus most of the other motherboards, which might only have 2. In addition to that, this board does have actually a Thunderbolt 4 header on here. So the cool thing about having the Thunderbolt 4 header is this motherboard will already have 20 gigabits USB on here. But if you want to have 40 gigabits USB later for whatever reason, you could add a Thunderbolt 4 add-on card higher to be able to get that higher performing USB specification. You've got more chassis fan headers here to be able to cover all your fans. And keep in mind that your chassis fan headers, where you've got one right here, you've got another right here, you've got another right here, that's the Thunderbolt header. The chassis fan headers do support multiple fans, so you can put like a splitter cable on there, run like 1, 2, 3, 4 fans just from one single header, no problems. You've got our Tough Gaming isolated audio design. Tough Gaming isolated audio design. That's also going to be on this board. And when we go to the rear I/O is quite nice on this board. You're going to have, you can see 2, 4, 6, 8, so 8 total ports. That's a very nice array of ports, including a USB Type-C with 20 gigabits and 2 10 gigabit Type A ports. A lot of the other motherboards might only have, let's say, 10 gigabit and maybe no 20 gigabit, right? Or they might be like 5 gigabit USB ports as opposed to 10 gigabit. So here we give you a nice mix where you get 5 gigabit, 10 gigabit, and 20 gigabit. So you get all 4 kind of high-speed standards. You also get the 2.5 gig networking, Wi-Fi 6, and USB BOS flashback, and you get your HDMI and your DisplayPort if you're using the integrated, of course, graphics. And you have an integrated IO shield, which just makes it easier. You install that, you don't have to worry about putting the IO shield. It's a far simpler process. Now, one last thing that you might not be aware of that I want to show you, and let me see if I can zoom in here onto some of these, but one of the cool things that we do actually on our motherboard is we have enhanced what are called ESD diodes. So these little guys right here that are above the USB ports, we actually have higher rated ESD diodes than many other industry standard competitors. So there's actually a kV rating, so it's the kilovolt rating that's applicable. So essentially what can happen is you can have a discharge. This can be a contact discharge or an air discharge for actually for static discharge, and these diodes help to protect the board. And so essentially, instead of it essentially kind of traveling to where it could hit the motherboard's what's called PCH or kind of south bridge, and it can actually cause the board to fail, it will actually dissipate that charge and essentially allow your board to get up and running. You might sometimes have to power cycle the board or reset the board, but essentially it mitigates the board from being damaged. And so we actually use a higher grade, higher performing ESD diode than many competitors. And not all competitors will place diodes throughout the entirety of the motherboard. So we have diodes on like the internal USB headers here, on the internal USB headers here. We also even put it on the LAN port, because you can actually also get a discharge on your LAN. You can get like a surge, spike, sag. Lightning strikes can actually pass this through, and you can actually damage your actual Ethernet ports. So this is something subtle. A lot of people don't even account for this when they're buying a motherboard. They just think, oh, motherboard is this spec, this spec, this spec, and this is what costs. This is why one motherboard is less than another and somebody's charging me more. But there's actually a lot of subtle details that go into what affects the board cost and the long-term reliability. And this is some of the ways that we actually help to improve the reliability and the durability of our motherboards is through some of these enhancements. So those are cool little things that you may not be kind of aware of. But another reason why I picked this, even though we're going with a more entry-level based board, you know, I think a really solid set of features, functions, and spec here, right? Where we get all the IO that we could really ask for, up to 20 gigabits, a robust VRM, good cooling, good mechanical layout. We've got the support for the M.2 PCI Express Gen 5. We have the reinforced DDR5 slots. We can easily support Expo. We have PBO enhancement. We've got debug lighting LED. Lots of ARGB headers there if we want to have that, and the internal USB-C, all good to go. So a solid foundation right here with our Tough Gaming B650M plus Wi-Fi. And it's going to pair perfectly, of course, with the chassis. So let me quickly just see right there if we had any quick questions right there. I've got some feedback from Tough Gaming. Aesthetics, fantastic, man. Thanks so much for the feedback right there. The HO computer says that the heatsinks look pretty beefy. Yeah, they're quite robust. They are very good in terms of their overall thermal dissipation performance. They are stacked. They also, I didn't note it, but these are also what we refer to as a dual contact design. So that actually means that they make contact not only with the power stages, but the actual inductors. So both of them actually are receiving contact to be able to provide thermal dissipation performance. Okay. Rob Lewis goes, I know the Asus Z790 DDR5 board is a nice board. Have a few people with 13900Ks and use 13700s and with 7200 memory CL34 and no issues. Yeah, it's a great board. Here, we're focusing on AMD based platform, but definitely we have a great lineup for Tough Gaming on both our Intel and AMD based solutions here. But definitely, I think this is going to be a great option right here. For a lot of users when they're looking to put together their system. So next up, we're going to go and we're talking a little bit about our memory that we've got the recommendation right here. So we're going to go with the DDR5 memory kit. This is going to be from our friends over at Crucial. And for this kit, why did I go with this kit? So there's lots of different choices in terms of memory, and there's even faster kits of memory. One, I really like the clean low profile design right here. It's just a clean black PCB with a black heatsink, low profile. So that means no mechanical obstructions regardless of what permutation or configuration you go with. It's just going to work. It's a really nice performant quality kit of memory, but the big part is going to be its streamlined interoperability and compatibility. So with traditional memory kits, when you actually get them up and running, you will actually have to still go in and enable an actual profile. So I've got a test bed right here, and actually I can show you the way that this will work pretty quickly. But for all intents and purposes, if you bought a faster kit, in most situations when you buy this memory, you'll have to install the memory and it will probably post at about 4800 MT. Now for AMD, if we actually take a look at AMD's what's called port table, the port table specification, and this if you're not familiar with what the word port table means, is that's actually going to be kind of AMD's operating parameters for what the memory controller on the CPU supports. So let's go ahead and actually look it up here. We're going to bring up the Ryzen 5 7600 and we're going to look at the official port table specifications. All right. So give me 1 second here to bring up these values, and we'll bring this up here. And essentially the important thing you would want to keep in mind is that there's essentially a maximum official rated kind of specification. And what AMD kind of defines by this is what they guarantee for every single CPU when they produce it, it will be able to run at this speed. Now, it doesn't mean that the CPU can't potentially support faster speeds through overclocking, which many users can pursue if they want to. They can go through overclocking, but that's not guaranteed, and there are also, of course, different other parameters. Now, Asus, we have already openly disclosed we will fully honor warranty support on our motherboards, even if you enable DOCP, AMP, or Expo on your motherboards. That's not an issue, but of course there are other kind of guidelines you have to keep in mind technically when it comes to enabling this from the CPU vendor side. So here I wanted a perspective of how can I kind of give the user the best experience if they 100% want to just run full stock operation and they don't have to be concerned about actually turning anything on or enabling something to get their rated performance. Because again, if you bought pretty much almost any other 6000 kit of memory, which is a very popular recommendation, you have to manually engage it. If not, the memory literally runs at 4800 MT. It will not be actually what's referred to as plug and play. You have to enable the Expo profile for it to run at that speed, or you have to enable the DOCP profile to get it to run at that speed. So if you go to specifications here, we'll scroll down, and this is actually what the AMD port table defines. You can see right there that 2x1, that essentially means 1 slot per channel or 1 DIMM per channel, so essentially 2 DIMMs. When you run 2 DIMMs, the maximum officially rated speed is going to be 5200. That should be 5200 C42 at 1.1 volts. And then 2x2 just means dual rank versus single rank. That would be commonly for like 64 gigabyte memory kits. Single rank memory is generally going to be for like 32 gigabyte memory kits or 16 gigabyte memory kits. So in either one of those situations, official max speed is 5200. If you actually notice, if you move over to 4DIMMs, which there's very few even official 4DIMM configuration kits, you're generally going to be breaking the Expo profile by mixing and matching kits. So that's also something you want to keep in mind. You're actually technically official max speed is only 3600 MT. A lot of people think that it's higher than that, and it's not. This is the official max speed. So 5200 or 3600, depending on your memory configuration. So my goal was, how can I have the user have the most streamlined experience? So let's get ready to do just a little bit of a quick demo. We're going to show the memory off right here. I just showed you what it looks like. Give me 1 second here to go ahead and bring out my little test bed that I've got right here so that we can kind of get this and kind of see what we got going here. All right, so I've got, this is a Prime X670E board. So it's not the tough gaming board that we're using here for our kind of build guide outline, but for the purposes of what I'm kind of showing you here, the demo will be exactly the same, because we've got a Ryzen 7700X, I think I have on, is what I have on here. The memory specification is the same for all AM5 CPUs. For the memory right here, we do have the Crucial. So this is the Crucial DDR5 Pro memory. Like I said, clean, compact, really nice aesthetic design. And like I said, the really cool thing is that it's going to have an automatic plug and play experience with the board. So that means that when we literally power it on, even if I was to clear the CMOS, even if I was to reload the BIOS defaults, even if I update the UEFI BIOS, in all configurations, it will always default to the official memory spec because it automatically runs at that speed. This is very rare for any other kits. Other kits, you're actually going to be running them at a different speed. So now let me go ahead and just connect my power supply right here. And we'll use the integrated graphics. I don't need to connect the graphics card here for this demo. Okay. All right, we've got our power there. There we go. And I can actually also show you guys this on this Intel platform if you wanted to kind of see it, because it works the same way. This memory on the Intel-based platform, the actual official memory speed is 5600. So the same thing, it would actually work natively at 5600 with no end-user configuration. And for those of you who do want to overclock, I can tell you I can overclock this kit to 6000 MT, so it does allow for margin. I can actually also tighten up the timings a bit too, so you still have some room if you're somebody that is interested in kind of going into performance tuning and you're willing to accept kind of the warranty considerations that come along with that, and kind of increasing power and kind of increasing heat and kind of all of those factors, right? But let's go ahead and finish connecting our system here. All right, let me get my HDMI plugged in here and get our keyboard and mouse. Okay. And let me quickly just see if we got any questions that kind of came up with this. All right. Are DDR5 memory interchangeable with AMD and Intel CPUs? I'm not exactly sure what you mean by your question. So DDR5 memory. So do you mean that you can use kind of like the same memory on an AMD motherboard versus an Intel motherboard? Assuming it's DDR4 or DDR5 for the motherboard that you're going to, yes, you can take that memory and move it onto another. Now there can be some differences. This Crucial memory is quite interesting because it's pretty rare, but it actually supports both profiles. So it actually has an XMP profile and it has an Expo profile. Most situations, most kits usually have one or the other. They don't do both. So this one is a very kind of friendly kit that can be used on both. If you were to take like an Expo kit of memory and you were to run it on an Intel motherboard, it would actually require it to use actually a modified option to be able to read that profile and apply it there, but it will work. And vice versa, same thing. If you took like XMP memory and you put it on an AMD platform, we have a feature called DOCP, which kind of reads the information, then applies it to an AMD based platform. But in either situation, yes, you can essentially kind of use them back and forth, right? All right, so we've got our system set up here. Let me go ahead and take my wireless adapters here. So I've got my keyboard and my mouse. All right, and go ahead and power it on there. All right, and we'll went ahead and reduced, I think, my little image right there. So in a moment here, we'll get ready to kind of bring this up right here. All right, so the system pretty much already posted, right? Yeah, that's pretty wild. It has both. That's correct. Yeah, it is pretty cool that it actually has both profiles. So I'm gonna go ahead and restart the system. That's just, of course, I restarted it during right when it was loading, so it was probably trying to load some kind of startup service, and it's like, hey, why are you trying to restart me when I'm trying to load things up, right? But the main point here is what I want to show you is essentially kind of how plug and play it is, and kind of the difference if we were to put a different kit, and how it would be, how a system would respond to this, right? So you as a user, when you're putting together a system, let's imagine like, hey, I've got my tough gaming board in, I put the CPU, and I'm going to that very first experience of kind of just turning on the system. Now we know from polling, and I want to know right now in the community, how many of, I'm expecting most of you guys, because you guys are enthusiasts, that you've all automatically enabled your kind of Expo or your XMP on your motherboard, right? You've done it. You've actually gone in and you've checked and you've enabled it, right? But we know from polling that actually a pretty close percentage, to somewhere between 35 to almost 50% of users, either forget to do it or don't ever do it. And so this actually is kind of a really big difference in terms of the overall core experience. So here, if I just go and I load F5 defaults, so this would mean that from just defaults, the motherboard is going to go from the basic default perspective, and technically, if it was a different kit in memory, it wouldn't automatically post at this speed. So I'm now going to go ahead and save and reboot. So upon saving and rebooting, this will essentially be like if the motherboard was starting for the very first time. And what we're going to actually see is that the memory speed is actually going to register at 5200 as opposed to a slower 4800 speed. The other great thing is that some people don't realize that when you also go with overclocked memory, it can also increase your SoC voltage, which actually can affect your idle power consumption and increase idle temperatures. So this also allows you to kind of run the most efficient kind of system, where if you want to have low power consumption, the lowest temperatures, this is also optimal for that, because you're going to get that kind of sweet optimal experience. So we can see right there, right off the bat, the system's already telling us that it automatically posted at 5200. That's it. It posted. It already did it. It just went straight through. I didn't have to actually go in and manually enable a profile. I didn't need to do anything. It literally already did it. If we go into our monitor section, we can actually see as well right here that it's already applied the 5200 value. So now if I go ahead and just reboot, it'll reboot and get ready to go into the operating system. And when we go into the operating system, we're going to also quickly see that it's gone ahead and registered the 5200. Now, for reference, what I'm going to show you guys is I'm going to put a different kit of memory in here. This is a memory kit that is an Expo certified kit, but you actually have to enable the profile. And I'm going to show you the difference in terms of how that would work at defaults. So essentially, kind of that true plug and play experience versus a non-true plug and play experience. And this is, again, part of the reason why we went ahead and selected this kit. Now, we are a great partner with many memory manufacturers, pretty much all leading memory manufacturers on the market. So our interoperability and compatibility is outstanding. So you can go with different choices, but I think if you're looking for a stable, reliable, performant experience that is truly plug and play, this is a great option for users, and part of the reason why we picked it for this build. So we can see our system's kind of booting up. It's going through everything right here. If you pop open Task Manager, actually some of you may not be aware, you can check your DRAM frequency in Task Manager. You don't even have to load another utility, and bam, we can see right there 5200. So literally did nothing. We just literally powered on the system, and this memory automatically worked at that speed, right? Yeah, so a user right here notes that I had to return my 7600 CPU because the IMC wasn't as performant. It's pretty rare. Most IMCs will generally be able to reach 6,000, but we have actually seen some IMCs that are very low sensitivity, and they might actually work only up to about 5,800 MT. Sometimes the memory kit and the IC sensitivity and the board topology and the UEFI can all be influenced too, so there's a lot of different factors to it. But this is also why I picked this, because I wanted to have essentially the most kind of streamlined, guaranteed experience for the user. This means that the user doesn't have to do anything, right? They don't have to worry about that their CPU could be marginal, right? They don't have to worry about tuning the memory. They don't need to do anything. It literally will just work at this speed right out of the box, right? So I've gone ahead and powered down my system, and we're gonna go ahead and switch the memory, okay? So we're gonna switch to a different memory kit, and I'm gonna show you what the experience would be like if you used essentially a different kit and how it's not necessarily kind of fully plug and play, okay? Now, this doesn't mean that the memory is not going to be a great memory and that it can't work with stability and reliability. It just, like I said, it's just going to be different in terms of its posting characteristics, and that it will require a user to do a little bit more work. So we're going to go ahead and power this on. So we went ahead and swapped out, and we have a different kit of memory in there. We're going to let the motherboard go through a little bit of a training cycle. This will take a little bit of time because essentially the motherboard has to kind of figure out, and it goes, hey, you know what? There's a new kit of memory that's on here, right? Now you'll see what happened. The motherboard at just base defaults has actually gone ahead and now registered the memory, but the memory is working actually at 4800 MT, which is correct. This is the way pretty much almost all other memory kits would work, is that it won't auto default to that 5200, and even the timings will actually be higher than normal as well. So the great thing is essentially that Crucial kit is a true kind of plug and play kit that will work straight off the bat with no user configuration, and you're good to go. And again, it does even have overclocking margin in there, so if you did want to get even kind of some more performance, you could go that route. All right, guys, so that's kind of a quick just recap of the demo that I wanted to show you. And one other kind of quick demo that I wanted to show you while we're in the UEFI, that the Tough Gaming motherboard features that allows you to get a little bit more performance if you're interested. And again, if you're interested in overclocking and accounting for what overclocking does, right? We have a great feature that we call PBO enhancement. So you can actually go into your Precision Boost Overdrive, you can go into the enhancement option, and we actually have 3 different parameters that are available to you. And so you can pick 90C, 80C, or 70C, and what this automatically does is it tunes the entire PBO settings specific to your motherboard along with your CPU with a specific temperature target. So it will ensure that essentially the maximum temperature that it now reaches is going to be either 90C, 80C, or 70C. So if you want to tune it to one of those specific targets, you don't have to know anything. You just literally go in and select the actual PBO target value, and that's it, and you can get better performance. That 90C is also quite impressive because even though that's below AMD's max rated temperature value of the 95C, it will actually give you better performance. So it's a pretty cool feature that we have that, again, is built into that Tough Gaming motherboard, where users, if they want to get a little bit more performance, they can go ahead and take that Ryzen 7600, pair that with that BA120, go in and enable something like this PBO with level 1 at the 90C target, bam, you're good to go. So a great way to be able to get some more performance from your system that is going to be on this motherboard that we went ahead and selected for the build, okay? All right, so that takes care of the memory kit that we have for the build. All right, so let me go ahead and bring up our next item. So the next item is going to be our storage. This is going to be streamlined, right, in terms of the actual storage option. So we're going to go with the Crucial P3 Plus. So the Crucial P3 Plus is going to be a very solid choice. This is a PCI Express Gen 4 M.2 based SSD. We went ahead and picked this because PCI Express Gen 4 is kind of the recommended baseline for direct storage. So we still wanted to be able to have direct storage acceleration performance. So you can see up to read speeds up to 5,000 MT. You have that kind of consistency and reliability that Crucial is known for in terms of kind of their NAND. They have a full SSD suite that allows you to monitor, update the firmware, 5-year limited warranty. With the 1 terabyte, you can see right there, 5,000 and then 3,600 for the write. This is going to be a very solid drive, so a lot of space, performant based drive, good to go, and you got to get that great experience at knowing that you also have one single vendor supporting you both the memory and the SSD if you were to have kind of any issues, right? And of course, with the 2 slots that the motherboard has, very easy if you wanted to kind of upgrade and go for a little bit more, right, in terms of kind of your storage. Okay, so next up here is going to be our graphics card. So we're going to go with the dual OC model. So the OC just means that it has a factory overclock on it, but we're going to go with the dual RADEON RX 7600. This is going to be a really solid choice in terms of the overall performance. So the dual model means it's got 2 fans. It has our new axial tech based fans with the ring barrier, so that means static pressure optimized, a nice compact based design, so it's going to easily fit inside of the chassis, gives us lots of room. It's not difficult to manage in terms of kind of the spacing, very easy. You still get rich connectivity where you've got the DP, HDMI, and then 2 more ports there, so you can go multi-monitor configurations on there. Very nice and clean and compact. You still get a back plate, single PCI Express power connector, 8-pin. So again, our power supply requirement is not very high at all. No RGB. It's just going to be a clean, compact design. This is how it's going to go in with the horizontal based mount. It's going to pair perfectly kind of with that black aesthetic that we've got with our graphics card. I think it's a great choice, again, for our performance. Now, if we take a look at kind of the overall target, in terms of kind of what can we expect with this GPU's relative kind of performance target, you can go ahead and take a look at a lot of the reviews that are out there. We're going to go ahead and take a look at one review site. So let's go ahead and bring up here, and we'll take a look at a Tech PowerUp. Tech PowerUp is a great review site in terms of kind of giving us a good baseline of kind of performance that you can easily kind of reference. Now, again, this is highly dependent on the overall kind of game engine that you're looking at, right? But we can see right here, if we take a look, you can expect an overall relative average for the RX 7600 at 1080p gaming at 105 FPS. That's going to be a great experience, and of course it could even be higher than that, right? If we take a look at some of the other kind of games, right, you can see Doom right here, you're going what is that, 210 FPS based performance, right? Battlefield right here is over 180 FPS. Overall though, the big thing is we're pretty much almost just about, and I think every game, actually even here under the Callisto protocol, right, pretty much everything's over 60 FPS. That means it's a very well balanced card at really being able to give you a smooth, performant, responsive experience. And keep in mind, you still have other technologies like FSR that you can go ahead and enable, right, that can allow you to go ahead and even see a higher level of performance. As we move into 1440p, again, very still healthy 1440p gaming performance that we can see right here, with still even quite a number of the games being able to actually hit above the 60 frames, above even this 90 frame marker, and we can see the relative average that we've got right here is going to be just about 75 frames. And keep in mind that over time too, you also see drivers improve the performance a bit to bit. Sometimes within a year, it's not unreasonable to sometimes see like a 5 to 8% increase. In some titles, it can even be more than that. So I could say, you know, fairly comfortably, we're looking at about that 75 FPS average for 1440p. So I think 2 very overall solid representation targets of what the kind of gaming performance is for this GPU class. So I'm very happy, I think, with this GPU. Again, cool, quiet, compact, not much you can ask for, I think, in that regard. So I think a very solid option that we've got for those that want to go with the dual series card. Now, lastly, let me go ahead and also talk a little bit about that. If you do want to maybe kind of pivot and you, like I said, want to go maybe a little bit cheaper, we can go ahead and go a little bit lower in cost. So if you want to save a little bit in terms of the overall kind of budget that you have, maybe you don't have as much, then that's still an option that you can go with that. So give me 1 second here, and we will go with kind of the other recommendations that you can go with. So let me bring up my information right here, and we will see right here. Okay, perfect. Yes. Our secondary recommendation would be right here, where you could pivot down and you could go with the dual Radeon RX 6600. The card's going to look very similar overall to what we just showed you with the 7600X, but you're going to save about $60. To me, the performance upgrade that you get, the better the multimedia engine, right, and the encoding support, along with the graphics architecture, all of that is definitely, to me, worth the $60 to kind of move up to that RX 7600. But the 6600 is still a very solid GPU, and if you're looking for, like I said, savings right now, $220 for Asus Dual RX 6600 I think is a solid choice. Now, if you want to pivot up, now again, this would really bring up the cost of the overall entirety of the build, but I'm just kind of just giving you for reference in terms of what the hardware and kind of what the whole experience could go is. You could definitely move up and you could go to something like our Tough Gaming 7900 XTX. That's a beautiful card. It's a fantastic option right here where you really step into a whole nother class in terms of the relative performance, right? This is going to be a much larger card, still very cool and quiet, huge amount of VRAM on here, and a great choice if you want to be able to have a very high-end card when you're talking about kind of the 1440p and even moving into that 4K gaming experience. This could be a great choice where you could pivot up to. And again, our power supply, motherboard, CPU would all still kind of perfectly align with this class of a GPU. So you could pair this up, you could go up to something like a Tough Gaming 7900 XT. But again, my recommendation is going to be to go with that dual RX 7600. If you want to pivot down, you can go with the RX 6600. And if you want to pivot up, you can go with that 7900 XT. All right. So next up, we're going to talk about the chassis. This is going to be in the Prime AP201. So here I want to give a shout out to a few of our community members that we have. So Snef Computer Design, one of the best builders and modders in the game. He's done a couple of builds in this chassis, the AP201. We're going to show off some images from them. We've got some images from our own headquarters team, from Mr. Matt Lee, another great builder in the community. He's also going to ensure some images. Sue Min, who I think is here that we have in the group as well. We have some images from him. So this is just to give you an example of kind of the range of what the AP201 can offer. I think it's a great choice, like I said, in terms of the chassis. So let's go ahead and just take a look at kind of what you could do inside of it, but it can easily fit all the hardware that we're looking for without any problems. So this is a build from Snef Computer Design. It's a custom water-cooled build. You can see right here, they also had a Tough Gaming Micro ATX board in there. This is actually also an AMD board. It might even be the same board. I don't remember if this was an AM4 and AM5 based board. They did a lot of really cool stuff. They did a full custom distro right here, but you can see right here that they've got a radiator here, and at the top, they've got then the other distro mounted in the back. Tons of space. Even though this is a Micro ATX chassis, this supports actually a full 360 millimeter radiator at the top. So if you want to go custom water cooling, you want to go AIO, you can do that. This chassis will give you room over time that if you even upgrade to a higher performing CPU and you want more cooling, you don't have to replace the chassis. I can tell you a lot of users, sometimes they go for a more entry chassis and then they want to replace things, and then all of a sudden they've got to do whole retrofits and they got to replace hardware. It becomes a lot more complicated, and it's actually wasting more money in the long run. Then here, this is very reasonably priced, and it's going to give you a lot of flexibility to build in right off the bat. This is a build from Sumin. You can see right here, same thing, lots of room that he had for his kind of high-end water-cooled build that he had on this board. Another user right here, the AP201. This is with a mini ITX board and then one of our Tough Gaming graphics card in there, and they went with a really big external custom water-cooled kind of setup, but you can still see that there's a radiator internal inside there. This is an example of our white-based version, which if you wanted to kind of do a cool kind of like color combo build, you could go the white chassis and then all the black components on the inside. That could actually still look really cool. You get a lot of the reflection from the RGB lighting that you can add in there as well. This is another one from Snef here within the chassis. You can see kind of just another example. This is with a mini ITX and then a single slot graphics card because it's all liquid cooled. One of my favorite builds that somebody did in the AP201. I think it looks absolutely fantastic. I wish I had this one right here to just keep right here next to me. Another example of our AP201 where we have the TG version. So the TG version just means instead of the high airflow model, it has a tempered glass side panel. So if you want to see all the hardware, you can get in that version. This is a build from Mr. Matt Lee, showing you can even fit a big Noctua based graphics card in there. That's our our 4.3 slot based graphics card. And here, lastly, is kind of just a good example of probably what it would kind of look like if you went with somewhat of the build that we are doing. So this would be the AP201 with a tower heatsink, that graphics card in there. You can see fans there at the bottom. And then once you have that mesh side panel, I really love this clean silhouette style that it has. So you don't see all the components, you just see a little bit of kind of that framed silhouette with a little bit of lighting. I think it looks really clean, really nice. I'm a big fan of it. So this is going to be the AP201. Again, it has lots of room, lots of flexibility to be able to mount your fans, your radiators. It's open, it's easy. You can fit different size power supplies in there, SFX or ATX based PSUs, and you have USB Type-C and your Type-A based connectors on here. So overall, I think a great choice for our build right here, regardless of which model you kind of go with. So this is going to be the AP201. I'm just going to give you a little bit of visual tour right here. And zoom in, notes, AP201 is a great case. I'm a big fan of it. Let me just right here. Text says, I just bought a T700 for my Strix Dash E board. Very cool. Liquify Mods, if the B650 has the features of the Z790 Tough, should have Asus AIC. Actually, it does not. Asus AIC on the AMD lineup works a little bit differently. We just implemented it at AMD this generation, and it's only on our X670 based motherboards, not on the B650 series. But the B650, they do still get that really cool PBO enhancement feature, but that's kind of one of the value adds that when you go up to the X670, which is kind of like more comparable to Z790, you get the Asus AIC feature, which would do some cool stuff like you get per core undervolting if you want to have that can be automatically applied for you along with some kind of cool functionality. Okay, so the other cool thing that I really love about this AP201 is that because it's very compact, you can still fit it there on your desk. You don't need a large amount of space, so a lot of flexibility for builders to be able to go ahead and kind of position this wherever they want, right? So you can see right there that you can fit the board. You've got tons of room down here at the bottom for just general airflow if you want to put supplemental fans. It comes with one rear fan in there, then you can supplement it with more fans, but you don't need to. You really don't need lots of fans. It's pretty much more just an aesthetic preference than almost anything else. Your clean mounting path right there for all your cables. Very simple and easy to build with, nice and open. And again, like I said, up to 360 millimeter radiator support in there, and you can support large graphics cards, no problem. So again, even if we wanted to go with something later, like a 7900 XT, XTX, you can still fit that all in there without any problems. Okay. All right. So that is going to be the Prime AP201 chassis that we've got right there. So that is going to be my recommendation there for that. Now, if you did want to go ahead and kind of pivot up, maybe you want to go to kind of a more traditional, like ATX based chassis, then probably my recommendation is if you're going to go with something a little bit more on the ATX side of the fence, it would require a different motherboard. Ideally, you could either go, like I said, with the TG edition, which is the tempered glass, or you could consider our Tough Gaming GT301. This is a little bit more expensive, so it's $110 versus the $80, but it does come with 3 ARGB fans in there, and you could fit your standard kind of ATX-based motherboards in there if you wanted to go with that. Otherwise, everything else that would fit in there would pretty much work. Oddly enough, though, the Micro ATX chassis has more flexibility in having a top mount radiator support. Here, this model, only with models that have a little bit more compact VRMs could you potentially mount the an AIO cooler at the top here. It's designed more for front mounting the AIO and only up to 240, where technically that AP201 that I noted actually can support up to 360 millimeter AIO, and it can do that at the top, but of course not at the front. So it's going to have that specific kind of orientation. But here you could support an ATX. But I think for me, I like the AP201. I think it's an overall better choice for most users. It's compact, high airflow, looks cool, compact design, and it's going to be a great option. But if you want to move up, like I said, that would be the Tough Gaming GT301. All right. So next up, let's see here. We're almost towards the end. Power supply. We're going to be going with our Tough Gaming. It's our Tough Gaming Gold Series PSUs. And so this is going to be the Tough Gaming ATX 3.0. Fully modular gold, and the 750 watt. And credit here to Mr. Matt Lee. So some beautiful photos that he went ahead and shared with us. One of the really things that I love about our Tough Gaming Gold power supplies, I think that they have the best cables that come in the box out of any power supply on the market. They're what are called a fully etched cable, so they're soft, they kind of almost have a little bit of a smooth wax feel to it, and they're very malleable, which means that they're really easy to bend and move and position, and they look really nice. Normally this is kind of something that users would pay, another maybe $30, $40, $60 to get custom aftermarket cables, whether you're talking about extensions. It would even be upwards of $100 if you wanted to buy, of course, native fully modular kind of cables to go. But the great thing is that these come already included inside the box. $130 for this PSU. You can get it on promotion. We've had it between like $120 to $130 in terms of the overall price point, but great PSU. Cool, quiet, compact, performant, and this is an ATX 3.0 power supply, so that means that it's going to give you the flexibility that it has support for newer graphics cards that are using that 12-volt high power connector. Now the RX 7600 that we're using uses only a single 8-pin PCI Express power connector, so there's no issues. It's going to be good to go, but this is the PSU that I would recommend for the build. It'll easily fit in there, not the 1000 watt, but the 750 watt would be my recommendation. Of course, if you want to upgrade, you can. We offer it in an 800, 1000, and there will be also a 1200 watt version. But again, we want to try to balance out this overall price to recommendation build for the build guide here. So I went with the 750 watt, because again, even the 750 watt, if we went with a higher end CPU, and we still even went with something like that Tough Gaming 7900 XT graphics card, that 750 watt would still be able to power that system. So you don't need to go crazy in terms of the power supply. You just want to get a good power supply, right? So overall, that brings us to around $1,100 for a total build, unless, like I said, you pivoted down. If you pivoted down by changing some of those parts I talked about, like going with like that RX 6600, you'd bring down the price by another $80, right? So you get a little bit closer to almost $1,100. Now, if you want to even kind of go down or pivot up in a couple of options, what could you do? Well, one, you could add some fans. So we have our Tough Gaming TF120 triple pack fans. That's 3 fans, ARGB fans, and they also come included with a controller. It's a great price. It's very, very competitive. It's actually hard to find a better fan relative to the airflow, static pressure, and the quality of the bearing. A lot of the fans that are competing against this TF120 are using some form of a hydro bearing. So somewhere probably around 80,000 hours in terms of the rating. The Tough Gaming fans use an advanced FDB bearing. That's going to be 250,000 hours. And that also gives you the advantage of smoother, kind of better tone, and that they can be positioned vertically or horizontally, and there's no difference in overall their relative performance. Okay. So that's going to be the Tough Gaming ARGB fans for, let's see right here, for, I think, oh, okay. Do I have it right here? Yes. Now, if you wanted to kind of go down, right, if you wanted to pivot down, you could go with a more entry chassis. So you could go with maybe a cheaper chassis on the market. There are definitely some other options from other companies that are lower cost, but I think for the flexibility and the performance and the design of the AP201, it's great. Power supply, same thing. You could go with a non-ATX power supply. You could start to get around to maybe like $100, $110. So the thing is it really worth saving that 25 to 30 bucks? And moving to AM4 and DDR4, you could definitely get down to like start to be like around, maybe if you did all of those things, around like $800, which is pretty nice. But again, how much performance are you going to lose? So let's talk about that. If you did move to AM4, right, what would you kind of lose? So if you went to AM4, I'm going to give you the board recommendation for AM4, but what would you lose? One, you would just lose performance, right? It wouldn't be as high in terms of the performance, but AM4 is still very mature, and it's very good for gaming performance right now, and you can get great CPUs. And of course, you guys, if you might have not seen the announcement, there is going to be one more AM4 CPU coming out, the 5600 X3D, which will be an exclusive at Micro Center. That's a great kind of option that's going to be priced below the 5800 X3D, which is a fantastic CPU. The 5800 X3D kind of goes head to head and beats the CPU that we're picking on our AM5 board, but our AM5 board has much more life in terms of that we can pick way more CPUs to get more performance if you want over time. We don't have PCIe Gen 5 support, so we lose that. We lose advanced support for the highest performing version of direct storage. We also don't have as much PCI Express Gen 4 support on the motherboard. So it does have PCI Express Gen 4, but it doesn't have it for as many slots or for secondary slots that are on the board. You won't have 20 gigabits USB, so the max you might get would be 10 gigabits USB. On our AM4 board, it's also not going to have an internal USB-C header. It'll have less ARGB headers. So this board has 3. The AM4 board is going to have 2. The AM4 board will have less fan headers, and it won't have an AIO fan header. It also won't have support for Thunderbolt 4, where if you want to be able to upgrade to that, and you lose, like I said, on that higher end CPU specification support. Now, the CPU that I'm recommending for the AM4 board is probably going to be starting off with like a 5600X. I think that's a very solid CPU in terms of kind of performance to price, and it's a big savings CPU wise. This is going to be $120 to $130 for a 5600X, right? Or the 5600 X3D when it comes out, which we don't know the pricing yet for it, right? But when you compare that against, of course, the Ryzen 7600, that's going to be $220. So you can see it's almost half the price. So it is a big savings, but you're definitely going to be dropping down in terms of performance, okay? And the other thing is going to be DDR5, right? You don't have DDR5 support, which can offer better performance and higher density support over time. So if you even wanted more memory, it's going to be easier to do that within DDR5. So that's what you lose by going with kind of AM4, but AM4 will still give you a very, very good platform if you want to upgrade to that. So let's go ahead and bring up here my AM4 board. So this is going to be the Tough Gaming B550 M Plus Wi-Fi 2. Okay. So this would be my recommendation right here, the Tough Gaming B550 M Plus Wi-Fi 2. This is going to be, what is that? That's 170 versus the Tough Gaming B650, which is going to be 230. Okay, so it definitely is a notable savings, but again, you know, you are going to be dropping down on quite a number of kind of features, but still a very, very nice board. So if we take a look, you still get robust heat sinks, good VRM design. You can easily still put something like here later if you wanted, like a 5800X3D, right? Which would probably be the best CPU if you were to upgrade to that. So if you went from like a 5600X, really you've only got one CPU upgrade that I really think is worthwhile. You could kind of go the middle of the road. You could go something like a 5700X or a 5800X, which puts you at around like $200-ish, so similar price to the AM5 series CPU, but it would be lower performance if you wanted a bit more cores. I think the 5600 is going to be a good CPU to pick here. You still get 4 DIMM slots. You're still going to have 2 M.2 right here, right? But it's not going to be as robust in terms of, like I said, having PCI Express Gen 5 support. You have less in terms of, like I said, the internal ARGB headers, the fan headers. You still have debug LED on here. In terms of the rear connectivity, you can still see it's quite nice. It has 2, 4, 6. So you have 2 less ports. You also don't have 20 gigabits versus the other board has the 20 gigabits, but you still have Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth and 2.5 gig networking. So overall, still a very solid motherboard, good specifications, good reliability, good core feature set. So it's a solid option if you want to be able to save a little bit of money and go with AM4. But I think for kind of the overall long-term strategy, I'm going to still recommend, like I said, in our core build, what we've gone with, which is going with the AM5 and the B650 based motherboard. Okay. And then if you wanted to switch to the memory you would save about what, like $30? Yeah, $30 by going to DDR4, and we would get the same kit of memory that we kind of showed, just the DDR4 version. So we'd get the Crucial DDR4 Pro version versus the Crucial DDR5 Pro version, right? So pretty much just swap those and you'd be good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly see if we got any questions, and then we're going to last round things out here with the monitor recommendations to kind of pair this up with, right? Let me go ahead and just see right here. H2O Computer says, I've seen the 1000-watt version for $149 for a little while. Yeah, so we might have had some promotions. I think technically the price is a little bit higher on that side. But yeah, if you want to go with the 1000-watt, definitely it's not a bad option. You can have that headroom. But again, you've got no problems. I've done demos over here with you guys where I've run the 13900K with my GPUs on a 750-watt power supply. It is entirely okay. You just want to match a good quality power supply with your system configuration. But of course, if you want to go with that headroom, you can entirely go with that route. No problems right there. Rob Lewis is asking about the layout. That's an entirely different topic. You can feel free to tag me in the PCDIY group, but it's not real. The thing you have to account for is that you have PCI Express lanes, right? So it's going to be pretty much any motherboard you're going to go with that has PCI Express Gen 5, which that -E has, you're going to drop down to the by 8, and it's irrelevant because with by 8, you're not limited in terms of your GPU performance. You can put 4080 or 4090 and run it at by 8, and it's still going to be effectively the same performance. So until Intel essentially implements their reserved by 4 lane, which is PCI Express Gen 5, which they haven't, you're not going to be able to have a configuration. Now, if you wanted to, for whatever reason, maintain your by 16, then just run a by 4 SSD. But if you want to be able to run Gen 5, you're going to sacrifice that because you're going to have to essentially allocate those lanes from somewhere, and you're allocating them from those lanes which are going normally to the GPU. But already right now, the way it works is that they already have a by 4 reservation that's linked for PCI Express NVMe storage, right? But it's by 4 based, right? So you can have that, and you can have a full by 16. But again, it's irrelevant. I see too many people worrying about having by 16 when it doesn't matter, because you can run, again, like a 4080 or 4090. You could run it in there, a 6950 XT, a 7900 XTX, a 7900 XTX. They would all be essentially the same performance between by 16 and by 8, okay? Tough Goner notes the new Tough Gaming Gold power supplies are now my go-to for builds. I love the cables. Yeah. So let me just see right there. Okay, so no other quick questions on that side, so I think we're good there. So let's go ahead and quickly just go to our monitor recommendations to kind of wrap things up here. So I've got a couple of monitor recommendations for you guys. If you kind of want to, pair this up with your build, if you kind of wanted to go with something. So what do we got? So we're going to go with first the VG. This is going to be the 279Q M1A, I believe. VG27, yeah, okay, let me adjust that. There we go, okay. So this one is going to be coming in at 259, okay. I think this okay, sorry about that, guys. Give me 1 second right here. So I think this is going to be a very reasonable price point for our monitor choice right here. So this is going to be the Tough Gaming VG279Q M1A. So this is going to get you a 1080p ultra high refresh rate monitor, right? So 27 inches, so a little bit bigger than the standard. Really nice and immersive, 3-year warranty, 280 hertz support on this monitor. It's a new fast generation IPS-based panel, so ultra low response time on here. It supports our all-AMD sync, which means backlight strobing, right? 100% sRGB coverage. So very, very solid monitor, very reasonable price point. Kind of pairs perfectly, I think, with really kind of the target build and the core experience that we're looking for. So this would be my first recommendation, not super expensive. And again, compared to some competitors with monitors in a similar price point, remember we have a 3-year warranty, and I think that the specs here are going to be very, very solid at competing against specs from other competitors. Okay, so this is going to be here our ultra high refresh rate gaming monitor. I think pairs really nicely with our GPU, and also gives you that room that later, even if you upgrade the GPU, you've got more refresh rate that you have available to you, right? Now, if you want to go up to 1440p, the next monitor we could go with would be the VG27AQMA. And this one is going to be for the 1440p people out there. So this would probably be my personal preference in terms of, I think, the monitor choice, because I'm a really big fan of 1440p. I really like kind of having that a little bit of additional kind of just screen real estate kind of space that I have for the monitor, for desktop productivity and for gaming, especially because I don't do as much competitive gaming. I like a lot of kind of action RPG, racing, simulation, and kind of FPS, but single player campaigns, right? So here, this is 27 inches, 1440p, ultra high refresh rate, again, 260 hertz, right? Also gives us FreeSync Premium certification support, variable overdrive, which ensures a much more consistent kind of motion clarity experience across the refresh rate range, and 100% sRGB on this model as well. Plus, it also has a bolder and brighter kind of SDR brightness experience. This is a great option. I think overall the best bang for the buck monitor that you can get when it comes to 1440p. Great choice. So we got those two options for you. You can go with the ultra high refresh rate 1080p, or you can go with the 1440p. Now, if neither one of those were in your budget and you really have to kind of go down and you just don't have enough money to kind of go in that, I got you covered still. And I want to be able to touch on this guy, which is going to be the VG 249. Excuse me, 249. Q1A. Here we drop down to $170, which I really think this is still really reasonable in terms of the price point. So very reasonable price point for this guy. Okay, 169 bucks. This is still going to be 1920 by 1080. We still get an IPS based display, so that's important. IPS still on this monitor, 165 hertz. Okay, so I think this is a very solid choice if you're just really on a limited budget and you don't have the ability to go up to my recommended model, which is going to be the higher refresh rate option with the fast IPS based monitor and a higher color gamut coverage. But still very solid choice. So you kind of got the good, you got the better, and you got the best. So pick whichever monitor you think is going to work best for you based on your kind of your budget and your preference and your kind of experience right there. Okay, so let me see right here, Tough Gaming K1. Okay, and let me just round this out right here. Give me 1 second to get this up. Okay, all right. So let's just finish this out here. And I'm going to quickly check for any quick questions. Here, let me just see right there. Rob Lewis says PG35VQ. That's a fantastic monitor. It'd be a lot more expensive. That monitor, when it came out, was like the price of the whole build. An amazing monitor, but yeah, a little bit outside of the budget, I think, of what we're looking right here. So just kind of wrapping a couple little things up. If you guys are interested, and again, kind of, you know, maybe have some peripherals. Maybe this is your brand new build right here. Kind of just some core recommendations. Keyboard, gaming, and mouse. We do have our Tough Gaming combo. So this is the K1 and the M3. This is actually for both the mouse and the keyboard. So you get them both together. So this is 70 bucks for the Tough Gaming keyboard and mouse. It's a very solid option. The M3 mouse is a really solid option. Where actually this goes head to head. I would buy this every day of the week over the Death Adder Essential, which is actually a $30 mouse, and we have a better sensor, better feet, better switches, I'd say better build quality. It's a fantastic choice, and this is a nice 5-zone RGB based mouse that also actually has some nice actually durability elements to it right there. So nice little dedicated volume wheel. It has a specialized coating right here for actually mitigating things like dust, debris, dander, ingress, rubber friction tests, abrasion tests, sweat tests, all this stuff. It's a very solid option for this price point. So again, it's not super expensive. If you want to go up to something a little bit nicer, then I would recommend on the mouse side, we do have our brand new Tough Gaming M3 Gen 2. This mouse is not expensive. This is $25 just for this mouse, but you get a much better sensor. You step up to higher DPI. It's also going to have 60 million rated switches. It has our anti-back guard, 100% TTF feet, much lighter. It's a super ultra lightweight mouse, 59 grams. It has RGB lighting on it. Again, this for $5 less compared to the Death Adder Essential. It's a much better mouse, and it looks great. And it's going to also support Asus Aura Sync. Great choice right here if you want to add this to the kind of combination, to the mix, to the build. I'm a big fan of it. If you want to kind of upgrade the keyboard, we have the Tough Gaming K3, which is going to be 90 bucks. The Falchion Ace, which I've used a lot. You guys have seen it right here. That's our 65% compact gaming keyboard. I absolutely love this keyboard. It comes with the full cover. It's RGB lighting. It's USB-C or 2.4 gigahertz wireless. It's full RGB. Absolutely fantastic for a clean, compact gaming build. And the Ace model even has improved stabilizers, lube switches right there, our NX-based switches. I'm a big fan of that, and it comes also in white. And then we have the ROG Strict Scope TKL, which I've used a lot here in our streams in the past. That's just kind of like, it's not, of course, this Claymore keyboard too, which would be a lot more expensive, but those are three kind of maybe keyboard options you could have if you wanted to upgrade from that K1 keyboard. You got the K3, the Falchion Ace, or the ROG Strict Scope TKL. All right, guys, so that pretty much wraps up our overall build guide. Let me go ahead and just bring back up the build list to kind of recap it. in terms of that, so again, this is all our AMD Gaming Build, a great choice for those that are looking to kind of put together a system that's targeted at 1080p gaming, 1440p gaming, and just a great experience when it comes to just having a performant, reliable system. So here you can see our Ryzen 7600, right? You can maintain kind of using that inbox cooler that it comes with. That'll work fine if you want to just use the cooler that comes inside the box, right? You also then have the option that you can go up, like I said, if you want to upgrade the cooler, you can go with that Thermalright BA120, which would be my recommendation. Motherboard is going to be that Tough Gaming B650M Plus Wi-Fi. Great choice right there, I think, in terms of the overall board. And that's going to give us, like I said, 20 gigabits USB, Wi-Fi 6, our PBO enhancement options. It's going to give us PCIe Express Gen 5, 2.5 gigabit networking. 8 USB ports, a really nice clean design aesthetic. Then for the drive, Crucial P3 Plus 1 terabyte. Then that Crucial DDR5 Pro 32 gigabyte kit. Go back and watch the stream on why we specifically picked that kit in the streamlined plug and play experience. The dual OC Radeon RX 7600 is going to be the graphics card. Again, you can pivot down to our dual RX 6600 or pivot up if you want to go really and you have a lot of budget. Then you could pivot up to something like a 7900 XTX. I wouldn't change anything else even if I pivoted up to the 7900 XT. Okay, keep in mind all the other things I would literally keep exactly the same. It's just if you had more budget to get more graphics card, you could go up to something like that. The Prime AP201, the black, the Airflow version, not the TG based model, although the TG model, if you want that, we also do have the TG based model so you could see everything. And then the Tough Gaming Gold ATX 3.0 power supply, 750 watt. All right. So let me go ahead and quickly just see if there's any other quick questions right there. How come the ROG keyboard do not, I don't know what you mean, Rob, by don't have the option. All our ROG keyboards are pretty much higher spec than the Tough Gaming keyboards. If you wanted kind of like a keyboard that's similar to the K1 in terms of kind of being super reliable or durable, it would be the ROG Strix Scope RX. It's a little bit more expensive. That one's $100 versus the, like the K1 or the K3. But that model has a full IPX, I think it's 56 rating. You could literally submerge it in water and it'd be fine. So like it's great because if you literally spilled anything, dust, debris, dander, it doesn't matter. That thing is built exceedingly well. It's a fantastic option. So if you really, really care about kind of that type of usage scenario, check out the ROG Strix Scope RX. Plus it has our RX switches, which I absolutely love. Smooth, stable, and responsive, right? No trackball options, like volume pause. Yeah, it has all those. Rob, it has, yeah, ROG keyboards definitely have all that. I mean, even right here, the Claymore 2 has all those options. This one, of course, I have the optional option to add on the secondary, the numpad right here. Right, so secondary numpad has a full volume wheel, has 4 macro keys. I have media keys right there for, pause, play, stop, muting, all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, trust me, we've got that. You can go check out some of our other streams where I've covered like pretty much I think all of our keyboards. I'll probably maybe do an updated stream on some of that because we've had a few new models that we've introduced since our last stream where I did I think I covered almost all of our keyboards. So I'll probably have an updated stream where we'll kind of do a recap for the new models that have kind of come out, right? All right, guys, that pretty much overall wraps up our stream for today. I want to thank you guys as always. Hopefully, for those of you that are watching out this stream, found it interesting or found it useful in terms of our build guide. We're going to probably try to have a couple more of these as we continue through. And when we get ready to relaunch the ASUS PCDIY YouTube channel, we'll probably have these hopefully at least every month. And we'll probably be targeting, good, better, best kind of build configuration. So I think having something, in kind of that entry level budget and that mid-range budget and that high-end budget, so that if you guys are looking for reference examples, you have that. We'll also be doing some physical build guides, right? Not just actually outlined build guides. So we'll try to have a mix in both of those. And we're going to continue to, of course, offer kind of insights and tips and tricks on how you can improve performance through things like that PBO enhancement option, curve optimization, how to tune your memory, a lot of other cool things that, of course, we also share inside of our ASUS PCDIY group. So if you guys are not part of our group, all you got to do is check out the link. If you're checking us out on YouTube or Facebook, you can find the link to our PCDIY group there in the description. Make sure to go ahead and join our amazing community of now over 45,000 members. It's a great space to be able to talk about all things PCDIY related and, of course, all things ASUS related. So with that, guys, we're closing out our stream. Take care, take it easy. Stay cool, stay healthy, enjoy your guys' weekend, and best of luck with your builds. All right, guys, take care. Take it easy.